There is a form of love that is rarely spoken about, yet it is lived quietly every day through small gestures, brief glances, and sometimes even through absence. The problem is that very few people know how to recognize it. Even worse, you might be mistaking love for loneliness. Or perhaps someone truly cares about you right now, and you do not even realize it. In this video, inspired by the deep psychology of Carl Jung, you will learn how to recognize love that remains unspoken and why it is far more common, and sometimes more dangerous, than most people think. If you ignore these signs, you might miss something genuine. But if you learn to notice them, you may finally understand who truly feels something for you, even if they never say it. Talking about love without discussing the unconscious is like trying to understand a book by looking only at its cover. According to Jung, most of our relationships do not operate on a purely conscious, logical, or rational level. Instead, they unfold in the hidden layers of the soul, where repressed emotions, fears, unspoken desires, traumas, and fantasies reside. When we feel something for someone but cannot express it, it is not always simple shyness or insecurity. Sometimes it is the unconscious attempting to surface, and what remains unsaid almost always finds another way to appear. One of Jung's central concepts that helps explain silent love is projection. This occurs when we see in another person something that actually exists within ourselves, but which we cannot clearly recognize. We project qualities, fantasies, desires, and even the hidden parts of our own personality onto someone else. Then we fall in love with that image, the symbolic version we have created. That is why, at times, we are not truly in love with the person themselves, but with the idea we have constructed around them, an idea that reflects something we wish to experience or heal within ourselves. Projection can be powerful, but it can also be risky. It brings people together, yet it can also create confusion. Another important concept is the shadow. Jung believed that every person carries a side they prefer to hide, impulses, fears, desires, and traits that do not match the image they want the world to see. The shadow is not only the negative parts of us. It includes everything we have pushed down or ignored. Very often, silent love emerges from this hidden place. We love quietly because the feeling frightens us, unsettles us, or simply conflicts with who we believe we should be. The shadow acts without asking permission. You may find yourself avoiding the person who attracts you. You may feel irritated with them for no clear reason. Or you might dream about them even after insisting that you want nothing from them. These contradictory behaviors are signals that the unconscious is involved. And when discussing silent love, it is impossible to ignore another powerful idea from Jung: synchronicity. Synchronicity occurs when events in the outer world align meaningfully with what we are feeling inside. It is not simply coincidence. It is as if life itself arranges certain encounters, messages, or subtle signs. You think about someone, and suddenly they appear. You hear a song, and it feels as though it was written specifically for the two of you. Moments like these can feel like quiet signals from the unconscious, trying to reveal something that the conscious mind has not yet understood. Jung did not consider these experiences to be mystical magic. Instead, he saw them as symbols. And symbols are powerful because they communicate directly with the deepest parts of the human psyche. So when someone loves in silence, it does not mean the feeling is absent. In fact, the opposite may be true. The emotion might be so strong that it moves beyond conscious control. The body reacts. Gestures become softer. The gaze shifts, yet the words remain trapped. Perhaps this is where the most genuine form of love reveals itself, not in what we manage to say, but in what quietly overflows despite the silence. There is also a clear and scientifically supported signal that the unconscious may be active. It happens when someone begins to move, speak, or even breathe in ways that resemble you. You say something, and moments later they repeat it in almost the same way. They laugh like you, use similar expressions, or sit in a similar posture. At first glance, this might seem like coincidence, but in many cases, it reflects something deeper: unconscious mirroring. There's a scientific explanation for this phenomenon through what are known as mirror neurons. These neural mechanisms allow us to imitate and connect with others. When we feel empathy, admiration, or emotional closeness, the brain begins to mirror another person's behavior without us even noticing. However, mirroring goes beyond simple neurological activity. It is also a subtle expression of connection. When someone begins to adopt your expressions, gestures, or way of speaking, it can be as if their unconscious is quietly saying, "I relate to you." It becomes a silent effort to synchronize with you. Of course, this does not always indicate love. It might simply reflect admiration, charisma, or a natural desire to fit into a social situation. But one important detail can change everything: consistency and exclusivity. If this behavior appears mainly with you, and if it continues even in private or more personal moments, the signal becomes stronger. It is almost as though, without realizing it, the person is trying to match your rhythm, silently communicating something like, "I understand you," or perhaps even, "I hope you notice me." Jung believed that genuine relationships form when unconscious minds recognize something within each other, when something inside one person identifies something familiar in another. Mirroring can become one of the pathways to that recognition. This may explain why you sometimes feel a strange sense of familiarity with someone you have only just met, or why you suddenly wonder, "Why does this person understand me so quickly?" Perhaps it is not only chemistry. It might be two unconscious minds attempting to communicate before words can fully form. But the body continues to speak. If mirroring already suggests a hidden connection, there is another sign that is even harder to control: the gaze. Unlike words, eyes rarely know how to hide the truth. Some glances seem to reach straight through you, not because they are intrusive, but because they carry something that language has not yet managed to express. A prolonged look that hesitates to stay, or one that turns away too quickly, often reveals far more than it appears to. Sometimes a person watches you while you speak, as if they are trying to remember every detail. Other times, they glance at you and immediately look away, almost as though they have been caught experiencing a feeling they do not know how to handle. None of these reactions are neutral. An emotional field is being activated. The gaze is one of the most primitive forms of communication. Long before humans learned to speak, they already knew how to look. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through images and symbols, and the gaze may be one of the clearest symbols of human emotion. It reveals tension, longing, fear, and curiosity, the feelings that often escape words. In silent love, the gaze is frequently the strongest clue because it slips past conscious control. You can hold back a sentence, but it is far more difficult to hide the spark, the focus, or the nervousness in your eyes. And it is not only about intensity. Some looks quietly say, "I care about you." Others seem to whisper, "I don't know what to do with what I feel." Some carry restrained desire, while others appear as if they have given up, even though the feeling has not truly disappeared. However, it is important to be careful. Not every intense gaze is proof of love. Sometimes the eyes idealize or project. They turn another person into a character within a personal story, and that can become dangerous. Loving someone in silence does not mean creating a romantic narrative where the other person does not even realize they are part of it. Because of this, the gaze can represent either genuine connection or pure imagination. The difference lies in presence. If, even in silence, the person is truly there, attentive with both mind and heart, then perhaps something real is unfolding. Something that has not yet become words, but is already appearing in subtle ways. And when gaze and gestures align, another sign often appears, so subtle that it can easily pass unnoticed. It shows itself in the type of memory that preserves not only what is obvious, but also the small things you barely remember saying. You might casually mention once that you prefer your coffee without sugar. Days later, it appears exactly that way. Or you briefly refer to a childhood book, and suddenly they arrive holding an old edition of it. These actions are rarely accidental. They reveal emotional attention. Remembering details often indicates emotional investment, because the mind tends to keep what the heart considers meaningful. When someone remembers even the smallest things you say, it usually means that, in some way, you occupy space within their inner world. But this is not only about having a good memory. It goes deeper. It reflects a kind of emotional listening that moves beyond simple information and enters the realm of connection. The person is not merely hearing your words. They are absorbing something about who you are. Of course, not every thoughtful action is a sign of love. Some people are naturally attentive, and others may have learned to use these gestures to create quick closeness. That is why context matters. What distinguishes genuine affection from an attempt to impress is the naturalness of the behavior, the ease with which it appears. When it emerges effortlessly, without calculation or performance, it often reveals something much more sincere. Affection that appears quietly, without demanding an immediate return or seeking recognition, is often where something genuine exists. It is a form of tenderness that does not ask for applause. And when this behavior comes from someone who is not like that with everyone, the signal becomes even stronger. Remembering a small detail becomes a silent message. I notice you. You matter. These small gestures are like hidden notes placed within everyday life. They speak softly, yet they communicate a great deal. In stories of unspoken love, it is often these details that carry the true emotional weight, appearing not in words, but in the gentleness of presence. But what happens when, despite all these signs, the person begins to pull away? When closeness does not bring two people together, but instead creates distance. This is the paradox of silent love. Sometimes the more real the feeling becomes, the stronger the urge to retreat. You sense that something meaningful exists. The connection is present. The glances meet. The exchange feels authentic. And then, unexpectedly, the person withdraws. There is no argument, no explanation, only distance. They become colder, disappear for days, or act more distant and rational. Naturally, you begin to wonder, what did I do wrong? The truth may be that you did nothing wrong at all. Sometimes closeness touches emotions that a person is not ready to face. When feelings begin to break through someone's emotional control, many people retreat, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. This is another paradox. The deeper the affection, the greater the fear of confronting it. That distance can feel like rejection, and occasionally it is. Yet in many situations, it is a form of unconscious self-protection. Silent love often carries ambivalence, the desire for closeness alongside the fear of losing oneself in the relationship. A person may want the connection, but not know how to manage it. As a result, they create distance, avoid the situation, or become quiet. According to Carl Jung, whatever we repress does not disappear. It becomes part of the shadow. And often it is this shadow that pushes someone away precisely when an emotional bond is growing stronger. The fear of vulnerability, the fear of repeating past pain, or the fear of losing individuality may all be working quietly in the background. There is also the influence of attachment patterns. People with an avoidant style tend to feel uncomfortable with emotional closeness. They can connect, but when the relationship becomes intense, they pull away. On the other hand, individuals with anxious attachment react differently. The more someone withdraws, the more strongly they attempt to move closer. The result is often an emotional pattern of push and pull that neither person fully understands. And this is where risk appears. Assuming that distance always means disinterest can create unnecessary frustration. Yet insisting on a relationship with someone who is emotionally unavailable can create illusions and lead to disappointment. The important step is observing the pattern. If distance repeatedly appears when intimacy grows, it may be a signal, a message from the unconscious indicating that something must first be understood before it can truly be lived. Jung once wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves. In some cases, another person's withdrawal does not only reveal their internal conflict, it also reflects our own. And within that uncomfortable mirror, genuine self-awareness begins. Even when distance appears, something often remains. It lives in the small gestures that continue to communicate quietly. I know you are there, and I still care. Did you get home safely? Don't forget to eat. Take a jacket, it's cold outside. These are not grand declarations. There are no dramatic promises or elaborate displays, yet they carry a sincere form of affection. In many stories of unspoken love, everyday care becomes one of the most consistent and often overlooked signals. Some people cannot easily say, "I like you," but they demonstrate it through daily actions. They notice how you are feeling. They offer help without being asked. They sense when you become quiet and try to be present without overwhelming your space. This type of affection does not impose itself. It appears quietly, without dramatic displays, but with consistent presence. It is the kind of presence that creates comfort and safety. It cares about your well-being without expecting anything in return. However, there is an important nuance. Not every act of care comes from genuine love. At times, thoughtful gestures may hide emotional dependency, the need to feel needed in order to feel valued. The distinction is subtle but important. There is a difference between caring out of affection and caring in order to gain acceptance. Genuine care does not demand something in return. It does not control, suffocate, or search for reward. Instead, it observes, supports, respects boundaries, and allows space. When someone shows this type of steady attention, without seeking recognition or applause, it may be a sign that love is already present, even if it remains unspoken. In a time where relationships are often loud and affection is displayed instantly, small gestures are frequently underestimated. Yet within the quiet rhythm of daily care, a type of love exists that does not need to prove itself. It simply continues to be there. And when that care becomes so specific that it almost feels like a reflection of you, another pattern may appear. The person does not only care, they begin adjusting their habits, tastes, or even opinions to align with yours. You compliment an outfit, and soon they begin dressing in a similar style. You mention a movie, and a few days later they have watched it and are ready to discuss it with you. When someone gradually shapes themselves around your preferences, something deeper may be happening. The constant search for your approval can be one of the most subtle and hidden signs of unspoken affection. Without saying it directly, the person may be silently asking, "Please see me positively." Affection becomes an effort to please. This dynamic can begin in a positive place: admiration. When we like someone, it is natural to want to impress them, show our best qualities, and build connection. But when the effort becomes constant, when someone measures every action according to your opinion, a deeper process may be taking place. Often this involves idealization. The person begins to see you not as you truly are, but as the version they wish you to be. At the same time, they try to become the version of themselves they believe you will like. The result is an exchange where neither person is entirely authentic. Jung warned about this kind of projection. Relationships built around the need for approval tend to be fragile because the bond forms around an ideal rather than reality. So if someone seems to revolve around your validation, it is worth paying attention. There may be affection present, but there may also be insecurity, fear of rejection, or a strong desire for acceptance. And wherever fear dominates, love can become trapped between what is genuinely felt and what is being performed. But what happens when this need for approval moves beyond words? When the body, something that rarely lies, begins to reveal what the person is trying to hide. Some people can conceal their emotions during conversation, yet their physical reactions tell a different story when you appear. A person who is energetic and talkative with others may become quieter around you. Someone relaxed in a group may suddenly become tense when you arrive. The shift is subtle but noticeable. The energy changes, behavior adjusts. This type of change is one of the most common and involuntary indicators of hidden feelings. It is not planned. It is the body responding to someone's presence. The tone of voice shifts, posture changes, nervous humor appears, or an awkward silence replaces their usual confidence. Jung described the persona as the social mask people wear in order to function within society. Everyone has one. It is not false. It simply serves a purpose. But when strong emotions arise, this mask can begin to weaken. And when it does, the shadow becomes visible. We become more vulnerable and more aware of how we are being perceived. Natural spontaneity turns into self-consciousness. This change in behavior can communicate more than many spoken words. It is as though the other person's presence activates an emotional alert within us, an attempt to present the best version of ourselves without even realizing it. However, it is important to remember that behavioral changes do not always mean affection. Sometimes they reflect shyness, social discomfort, or general insecurity. The key factor is comparison. Do they behave this way with everyone, or mainly with you? When the shift appears specifically in your presence, it suggests that you are touching something deeper, perhaps admiration, attraction, vulnerability, or even all of these at once. Silent love often includes this uncertainty, not knowing what to do with the emotions that arise. In the middle of that confusion, the body communicates. It hesitates, retreats, reveals, and protects. You may not fully understand it, yet you can sense it. So how can someone distinguish real love from fear, neediness, or projection? The answer often does not lie in the other person's behavior alone. Instead, It appears in how you feel when you experience those signs. Not every silent gesture is born from love. Not every remembered detail, act of care, or careful approach represents genuine emotion. Sometimes what appears to be affection is actually emotional need. Sometimes what feels like connection is simply attachment. And this is where many people become hurt. When we are emotionally involved, we want to believe. We begin searching for signs, interpreting gestures, and assigning meaning to actions that may simply be the unconscious, repeating familiar patterns. As Jung explained, what remains unresolved inside us often repeats itself in our external relationships. We reenact situations that reflect what we still need to understand within ourselves. That is why it becomes essential to pause and ask honestly, what I am receiving or giving, is it love or is it attachment? The difference may appear small, but it changes everything. Genuine love has one defining quality. It allows freedom. It respects the other person. It does not pressure, demand, or attempt to reshape someone according to its expectations. Even when intense, real love feels light. It does not suffocate, trap, or manipulate. Emotional attachment, in contrast, often comes from inner scarcity. It depends on the other person to feel secure. It needs constant validation, to be seen, valued, and wanted. And when that reassurance is absent, it reacts with fear. If the bond seems to require constant vigilance or repeated reassurance just to survive, then what exists may be attachment rather than love. There are also a few honest questions that can help clarify the difference. Ask yourself, do you feel free when you are with this person, or do you feel anxious about saying the wrong thing and damaging the connection? Do you feel able to be your true self, or are you always trying to please, measuring your words and adjusting your behavior just to keep their attention? Love does not require a performance. Attachment often does. Another important question is this: does the person truly see who you are? Do they recognize your flaws, your limits, and the days when you are not at your best? Or do they only notice you when everything seems perfect? Idealization is usually a clear sign that projection is stronger than the real relationship. And every projection eventually reaches its limit. Sooner or later, the imagined image fades, and what once felt magical can transform into pressure, frustration, or emotional distance. Carl Jung emphasized that a genuine connection between two individuals happens only when each person is willing to look inward before searching for the other. Love becomes possible between complete individuals. Attachment, on the other hand, often forms between two halves, hoping the other will fill what they feel is missing. If the emotion is authentic, it will remain steady even in silence, even during pauses, and even without guarantees. Real love does not depend on control. It simply exists. And if what you feel is not love, that realization is also meaningful. Sometimes the pain does not come from losing someone, but from losing the idea you created about how things were supposed to unfold. Recognizing that difference can already be a major step toward emotional freedom. Now consider another possibility. What if, during all this reflection, you realize that you might be the one who has been loving in silence? That the unspoken emotion is not truly about the other person, but about a part of yourself that has not yet found the courage to step forward. Maybe you recognized yourself in many of the signs discussed earlier, not as the person receiving them, but as the one expressing them. Perhaps you are the one who remembers the details, who cares quietly, who avoids direct eye contact, or who behaves differently when that person is near. You feel the emotion, but you never speak it aloud. Why does this happen? Often it comes from fear, the fear of damaging a friendship, the fear of rejection, or the fear that your feelings will not be returned. At times it may also come from pride, the protective barrier we build to shield our vulnerability. And sometimes the reason is simpler. You are still trying to understand your own feelings. Love can arrive unexpectedly. It can appear without logic or planning, and that unpredictability can feel unsettling. Loving in silence may seem safer. You avoid exposing yourself and do not have to face rejection. Yet over time, what once protected you can also suffocate the feeling. The emotion remains suspended somewhere between your heart and your voice. You begin living imaginary stories in your mind, scenarios that never truly happen. Time moves forward, the other person continues with their life, and you remain waiting for something that may never occur and that you may never attempt to pursue. Jung spoke often about the importance of integrating what is hidden, bringing into awareness what lives in the shadow. Loving in silence, however poetic it might seem, can sometimes mean leaving a part of yourself unseen. That hidden feeling does not necessarily need to be declared to someone else, but it does need to be acknowledged by you. One helpful exercise is simple. Write. Write freely, without editing, without worrying about grammar or structure. Allow your thoughts and emotions to flow directly onto the page. Describe what you feel, what you avoid, and what you fear. This process gives a voice to emotions that have remained quiet inside you. It becomes a form of silent release, an internal catharsis that can lead to change. Because before asking anything from another person, you must first learn to truly listen to yourself. Sometimes, through that honest reflection, you may realize that it is time to let go. Other times, you might discover the courage to finally speak what you feel. But another possibility also exists. What if the love is not returned? You noticed the signals, sensed a connection, and waited for something to reveal itself. Yet gradually it becomes clear that the other person does not feel the same way. Or perhaps they feel something, but not with the same depth. Unrequited love is one of the most human experiences, and at the same time, one of the loneliest. The feeling belongs entirely to you. It cannot be shared with the person who inspired it. There is no mutual promise, no clear future, only you and your emotions. Yet this does not make the experience meaningless. In fact, with time and care, it can become one of the most transformative emotional experiences. Loving someone without receiving that love in return does not reduce the sincerity of what you felt. It does not erase the beauty of the emotion. It simply reminds you that love also requires accepting the limits of reality. At first, it is natural to convince yourself that there might still be a chance. You may think the other person just needs more time, or that perhaps you misunderstood certain signs. But eventually, there comes a moment when holding on becomes a form of self-sabotage, when continuing to nourish hope without a real foundation keeps you trapped in something that does not truly exist. Moving forward does not mean denying the emotion. Instead, it means giving it a different place in your life. You can still love someone and allow yourself to move on. Love does not need to disappear for growth to occur. It simply needs to transform from expectation into understanding. There are practical ways to approach this process. First, try to break the cycle of idealization. Stop replaying every conversation or gesture repeatedly in your mind. That habit only strengthens the illusion. Second, redirect your energy toward your present life, toward real people, meaningful activities, and personal goals. Movement creates clarity. Third, allow yourself to feel the emotion fully. Cry if needed, write about it, or speak with someone you trust. Pretending that the pain does not exist only extends its influence. Jung once said that what we deny controls us, while what we accept has the power to transform us. Acknowledging the pain is the first step toward reducing its hold over you. Gradually, you return to yourself. You begin to understand that the value of your love does not depend on another person's response. Without pressure and without urgency, you make peace with reality and open space for new possibilities. But what if, even after understanding all of this, you still feel the need to speak? Sometimes silence that once protected you begins to feel like a prison. At that point, a question arises. What if I say it? What if I openly share what I feel? Expressing your feelings is not about obtaining the other person. It is about freeing yourself from an unspoken expectation that keeps you emotionally suspended. It allows you to give a name to what exists within you and to let it move in whatever direction life requires. However, the way you approach this moment matters. Awareness is what transforms a confession into an act of maturity rather than one of desperation. First, ask yourself why you want to express it. Is it to relieve emotional tension? To create the possibility of something genuine? Or to persuade the other person to feel the same way? If the main motivation is the need to be loved back, rather than the desire to express yourself honestly, it may not yet be the right time. Second, choose the moment thoughtfully, for both yourself and the other person. Avoid impulsive messages or situations filled with emotional pressure. Feelings deserve a respectful space to be spoken, even if the conversation remains simple. Third, communicate calmly, with clarity and sincerity. Avoid dramatizing the situation or demanding an immediate answer. Share what you feel and allow silence to follow, not as a prison, but as a pause where understanding can emerge. Jung believed that part of our life's task is to make the unconscious conscious. Expressing a hidden feeling is one way of doing exactly that, bringing something from darkness into awareness. Perhaps the other person will not feel the same way. Perhaps they will. But the most important change is that you are no longer trapped in uncertainty. You are no longer a prisoner of maybe. And that realization alone can be deeply liberating. Unspoken love is not less real simply because it was never expressed. It has simply followed a different path, the path of quiet presence, subtle gestures, and signals that only attentive people notice. Maybe someone came to mind while listening to this. Maybe you are living a similar experience right now. Or perhaps you have realized that something you once misunderstood was actually a feeling in disguise. What truly matters is that you now see more clearly. Silent love rarely exists in grand declarations. It reveals itself in details, in the small moments that happen when no one else is watching. Jung reminded us that what remains unconscious can influence our lives. When we begin noticing the signals we once ignored, we gain freedom. The freedom to choose more consciously, to feel with greater presence, and to stop repeating emotional patterns that quietly harm us. This does not mean becoming suspicious of every gesture or trying to interpret every action as a hidden message. Instead, it means remaining open to emotion while also maintaining maturity and balance. Some feelings never become words, and that is completely acceptable. What is not healthy is losing yourself while waiting for those words to appear. Love may be subtle, but your awareness does not have to remain blind. In the end, recognizing unspoken love requires sensitivity, attention, and courage. It may not change the story itself, but it can transform the person experiencing it. And that change can influence everything that follows. Only those who learn to see beyond words can recognize love that is never spoken. And once you notice it, your understanding of love may never be the same again. If this video resonated with you and touched something meaningful inside, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we explore subjects that are rarely discussed openly, the hidden emotional dynamics behind human connections. Turn on the notification bell so you do not miss future videos. There is much more to explore about relationships, the unconscious mind, and the subtle signals that shape our emotional lives. And if you have stayed until the end, share your thoughts in the comments. Right. I've learned to hear the silence. That simple message will show that you were here until the final moment, and that this conversation found a genuine place within you. See you in the next video.